I wonder if you know what's the biggest funeral this country has ever hosted? Wrong. It happened in 1912. And there was 35,000 people who attended the funeral, probably 10 times the size of Diana's. And they had decided that actually none of the churches in London could host it because there were so many people they knew would want to come. So they held it in the Olympia, the exhibition hall, and 35,000 people crammed in there. They said that it took 20 minutes for the coffin just to get to the end of the hall, right down to the start, for the thing to start. For 3 days before the funeral, 150,000 people walked past the casket because they wanted to pay their respects to the man who died. And a few days after the funeral, there was a procession through the city streets of London, crossed kind of 5 miles through the streets, and the whole city come to a standstill, and the streets were just absolutely rammed with people. They reckon it was like 20 deep, the people who were queued at the side. Hundreds of thousands, maybe even up to 2 million, were watching, paying their respects. And the man in the coffin wasn't wealthy, and he wasn't royalty either. His name was William Booth. And William Booth started a movement so that when he died, he left behind 22,000 leaders, running churches, running addiction centers, running homeless centers, feeding the hungry across 58 countries right across the world. And the interesting thing is, he had no advantages in his life to bring him to that point. Because, how do you get to the point when you have such an impact on the nation that yours is the biggest funeral we've ever had? How do you get to that point when, the whole city grounds to a standstill because people want to pay respects and honor you? Interestingly, he had such a poor education. He left school at the age of 13. His dad had died and his mum was poor and he needed to look after his sisters. So he became a trainee pawnbroker at the age of 13 just so his family had enough money to eat and to live. How do you go from leaving school at the age of 13 and having no education to getting the whole city at a standstill to honor you when you die? How does that journey actually happen? And I've read his story for many years, studied what people say about him, read the things that he says. And if you were to name the moment, the reason why he became a man who impacted the nation, impacted the world, it all comes down to a moment when he was 15. He got dragged to church. He got dragged to a Methodist church at the age of 15. And if we have the slides up. And at the age of 15, he wrote in his diary these words. God shall have all there is of William Booth. 15. And he spent the next 68 years of his life living it out. Left behind 22,000 centers to transform. How did he know so much about poverty and addiction and unemployed and the homeless? He was a trainee pawnbroker. He saw them all coming in. He saw people's life situations. So when he went to tell people about Jesus, he didn't want to just go to the middle class who liked going to church. He went to the least and to the lost, to the people who were struggling. And as he told them about Jesus, he realized he needed to do other stuff. At the time, a lot of disadvantaged people would work in match factories, and the chemicals in matches were very dangerous. But the company didn't care about that because they were making a profit. So William Booth said, stuff it, I'll set up my own factory with safe chemicals. And he did. He set up a match factory that was safe for people to come because he thought that's what it meant when you pray, God, you can have all there is of William Booth. So here's the question. What in the world would possess somebody to make such a brave prayer that is so dangerous? Because let's be honest, it's quite an inspiring story. It's changed my life. But the thought of praying that prayer, that's a bit terrifying, isn't it? God shall have all there is of Derek Hughes. God shall have all there is of insert your name. That's a bit terrifying. if you think about praying that right now? Like, what would that mean for your job and your career to pray that prayer? What might that mean for that money in your bank account? Or for some of the habits that you do? What that might mean for your relationships and how you spend your time? What might it mean for the house, for your car, for where you go on holiday? You know what I mean? I don't know what it might mean, but there'll be something in me, just as there's something in you that's a little bit scared to pray. Because, it's a bit dangerous, a bit terrifying. So, how do you get someone like William Booth who prays it? God should have all there is of William Booth. There's a passage in Isaiah 6 which might help us understand what's going on. And you can turn to it, or I'll just talk you through it. Isaiah chapter 6. And it begins with these words. It's a story about an encounter Isaiah had, which was a bit like what William Booth had. And it begins by saying these words. It said, "It was in the year King Uzziah died that I saw the Lord." In those days, kings either provided chaos or stability, depending on which king. And if you change king, the country could go in uproar. And for 50 years, 52 years, King Uzziah had been in charge. And most of that time, there was a bit of stability. And the country was doing reasonably well. So when the king changes, actually anything could change. And so there's in this kind of season of change, Isaiah has this moment where he sees the Lord, and he describes this encounter where he sees God on a throne, and God's got a robe, and there's kind of angels and the smoke and the temple shaking, and they're singing this song about God is holy. And it's just if you were to read it, it's about their eyes and their wings. It's a bit weird, you know what I mean? And it's just what is that? That must be terrifying. And Isaiah is terrified, and he says, it's over. His first response is to say, I'm doomed, I'm a sinful man. Yeah, I'm in the presence of this crazy vision of God, and I've been experiencing something, and I just feel not good enough. That's his kind of first response. And an angel comes and puts a coal on his lips and tells him that he's forgiven. And then there's a voice that says, who am I going to send? Who can I send? And Isaiah says these words. If you're a church person, you'll know the words that are about to come, and we can slip over them so easily. But the question I'm thinking about is he's terrified of this vision of God, and who wouldn't be terrified? And yet when he hears this idea of who shall I send, something possesses him to make this brave prayer, not dissimilar to William Booth, which is hey, I'm here. Send me. That's a brave prayer. Could you pray that now? God, here I am. Do you want to send me? Because, I'll be honest with you, when I was a new Christian in my early 20s, I was totally up for praying that prayer, but I didn't have a clue. You know what I mean? When you're younger, you're a bit kind of naive, aren't you? You don't kind of realize what life's really all about, and so you just say crazy stuff like that. That's why, young people change the world, and old people like me are well, got a mortgage and stuff. And it's well, do you know what I mean? You can go and kind of change stuff, but if you set up a homeless center, are you encouraging homelessness? And you've got to think about the policy implications, and we need to do a study. Maybe you should set up a committee and do some investigations, If you're 15 and you haven't got a clue, you're just should we just go and change the world? Yeah. And Isaiah just has this, yes, just send me. Just send me. And it's why would he do that? Why would he pray that? Why would Booth pray that? Because there seems to be something that when someone encounters God, when they have an experience of Jesus like Booth did in that Methodist church, like Isaiah did here, that it kind of breaks something inside, that suddenly you're able to see that you were created for something more, that something stirs, that you're actually, I want to live for something. I want to, me, my mark, I want to be part of something that's just bigger than Netflix. And it's almost when you have an encounter with Jesus, it exposes everything. It exposes that some of the things we get so bothered about, and we saw the things that we give ourselves to, it doesn't really matter, does it, if we get a new sofa or not? Do you know what I mean? But it can just expose those things of like what really matters, what is really significant. And it's almost for Isaiah, that encounter just strips stuff away. And he's like, even though I'm terrified, my response is, I'll go. Because he has that encounter which just changes stuff. When you encounter, you just like see life clearly for the first time. I wonder if you've had that encounter. I wonder if you had an encounter with Jesus that just helped you to see clearly. See stuff that doesn't matter, that we give all our time and attention to. And for you to see clearly about what it's all about and what you want to give your time and attention to. In 2021, Sarah Drinkwater, she was a tech executive here in the UK. She saw an advert on Twitter. And it said something like this. We've got an exciting, surprising, time-consuming, possibly stressful, but also life-changing project. Fill in the form if you're interested. So like when you scroll on Twitter, you don't only think very carefully, do you? So she didn't, and she just filled it in. It was an advert from TED Foundation, you know, the TED Talks. It was that organization. They filled it in. And she was one of the successful ones who filled the form in. And so she got a message some days later, said, your application has been successful. We are wiring you a gift of $10,000. There's only 2 rules. You need to spend it within 3 months, and then you just need to tell us what you want, what you did with it, but the rest is yours. Behind the scenes within TED, there was a couple who were part of the TED community that had $2 million that they wanted to give away. They'd had a big windfall, so they decided to give it away, and they thought they'd have a bit of fun. And so their bit of fun was to anonymously put an advert on Twitter, and they give 10 grand to a whole bundle of people. And this is what they said to them: spend it within 3 months, tell us what you did, but apart from that, you're on your own. Crazy story. So Sarah gets the money. And she decides to be very noble. And she said, you know what I'm going to do with the money? She said, I'm going to give it away to 20 little micro projects in my community. $500, that's what I'm going to do with it. That's what she decides. Next day, she gets a massive tax bill. She's like, I might change my mind. She said, no, I'm not going to change my mind. She decides to stick with the plan. And so she does it, and she gives some money to fund a pensioners' picnic. One of the projects was sensory toys for autistic children. Another one, there was a bank of flowers outside of school. Another one was a public artwork to brighten the community. And this is what she says. She's like, I walk around my community and I just see the things that my gift has contributed to. And she says, I'm just full of joy. Looking around my community, I just see stuff as, oh, that was because of me. And that was because of me. And I'm on a boat heading to France. And I read that story, and something just lands in my soul. And I have a holy moment where it's not just a story, but it's a whisper of the Holy Spirit. And I'm thinking, I've got to do something like that. Like, I've got to do something. I don't know how God speaks to you. I don't get the angels thing. And I usually don't get images and pictures that sound really spiritual. I just get sometimes there's an idea, thought that just got like a heavy weight to it. You know, like a good weight, like substance weight. And I don't always know it at the time, because I have lots of ideas and most of them just evaporate. But every now and again, there's something that doesn't go and it stays, and this one's just stayed. And I spoke to Karen, and I was like, she'll speak sense. And I said to Karen, I said, listen. And Karen was like, we've got to do something about that. I was like, oh, crumbs. I said, well, we don't have 10 grand. What would that look like for us? And so what we'll do, we'll say to the community of Eccles, what projects do you think should be funded? What's the micro projects that should be funded? And then we'll get 10 or 15, maybe $1,000 each, we'll fund them. And then what we'll do is we'll try and find some people to give them money for it. And so that's what we are doing in Eccles. It's called Together in Eccles, Together for Eccles. And so we've done it, we've started it, and we've advertised around. We've got all sorts of projects coming in. One's about like an older people party to help with isolation. We've got a group that's going to feed families over Christmas. We've got stuff about disadvantaged families that don't always have time to play together, and our group's running that. Another one's like repair workshops for people to repair their clothes to give them a sense of identity. There's loads of them. We've got 12. We need about 11 grand to fund them. So we booked the biggest venue in Eccles, and it's happening in 2 weeks' time, 13 days' time. And people are going to arrive, and as they go on, we're going to say, do you want to buy a token? A little heart, £25, or a white one for £5, buy as many as you want. And all the charities are going to be there, and people are going to come in, and they're going to wander around and have a look, and if they like that particular charity, they're going to put the thing in. And that charity will get £25 that they've donated. But I'm scared. If I'm really honest. Because I don't think anyone's going to turn up. Because, so we're advertising this event, right? And there's no bouncy castle, and there's no magician, there's no entertainment. We're saying to one of the poorest communities in Greater Manchester, do you want to come along and just want to give to projects? That's all we've got. You'll get a cup of tea with it. In 2 weeks' time, we're hoping people come. But I've been a little bit crippled by fear, if I'm honest. Because I fear that nobody's going to come. And I fear like the 11 people from Sale who said, yeah, Eccles sounds exciting, we're going to come. And this is their first event. And they're going to turn up at the biggest venue in Eccles, and there's going to be nobody there. And they're going to look at me, and they're going to ring Andy Barclay-Watt and say, we're coming back. Or I think about the Eccles people who I've journeyed with over the last 3-4 years. And to be honest, they let me down. Because when we gathered them together, I thought they'll save me. And I said, we've got a crazy idea. It's not going to work, but what do you think? And they're all like, let's do it. I was like, oh, crumbs, we're going to have to do it now. So I'm afraid. Some mornings I wake up and I carry it. But then I think, here's my experience of praying that prayer, God, you shall have all that is Derek Hughes, that and maybe I'm not supposed to say this, maybe this is not the right answer, but for me, the fear doesn't always dissolve. Do you know what I mean? Just because you get paid for it and you work for the church, sometimes the fear doesn't dissolve at all. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, we're going to do that, and I'm still scared and I'm a bit anxious and I'm not sure it's going to work. And it might not work. Here's the thing, just because God's called you to do something, he doesn't offer success as a guarantee. He just says, do what I say. Go and read the book of Jeremiah. No, don't read the book of Jeremiah. That'll persuade you not to do what God says. It's just a story of it not working. But here's the thing. What else is there? Do you know what I mean? What else is there? If I don't embarrass myself at Eccles Town Hall in 2 weeks' time as an empty hall and all the church people going, you're not a very good leader. And I say, no. But apart from that, what am I going to do? Just sit home and watch Netflix instead? What else is there? What else am I going to do with my life? And so whenever I want to run, I just think, well, what am I going to run to? What else am I going to do? Don't get offended by this, but occasionally I get the impression from some Christians their biggest dream and ambition is to pay off the mortgage. The biggest dream and ambition is they hope that their kids grow up and don't take drugs. I'm not saying don't pay off your mortgage, and I'm not saying give your kids drugs, right? But what else is there? Actually, there's probably quite a lot. Because when you encounter Jesus, the stuff around you strips away, and you get a real sense of what matters. And it doesn't mean that you need to go and start a national movement like William Booth. It doesn't mean you need to give all your time for the church, although it might. Hale Green are looking for a leader, and maybe there's someone here, and right now God's going to nudge you and say, your job, you need to go part-time because you should be leading Hale Green, leading forward. God can do stuff like that. But when you work for the church, it's not better than anything else. It's just do whatever God's called you to do. Roger spoke a couple of weeks ago. Roger's over there, and he told just this story that I have not been able to get out of my head. And it's about the porter who used to work at Salford Royal. And he was a Christian. And he used to push people to surgery, and he'd pray for them. And when he collected them, he'd take them back and he'd pray for them. And it's well, you can have prayer meetings here, but imagine having prayer meetings there. And that was his brave move. He didn't need to jack that in and then go on a rota or work something else or whatever. That was his brave move right where God had placed him. Just like Booth had learned about poverty from being a pawnbroker. It's wherever God's placed us, you just make the prayer. And it could mean once a week, you just have a meal with your elderly neighbor. But it could mean you jack your job in and start a non-profit. You know, it could be either end of the spectrum, but it's just about like wherever God's placed you, that you serve him faithfully, whatever it looks like. Do you think you could pray that? God, have all there is of Derek Hughes. I mean, don't pray that one. If you're all praying that, my life's wrecked, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Life's hard enough as it is, right? Pray it for yourself. But could you pray that? I don't know if you know, but Martin Luther King had no plans to tackle racism. He had no interest getting involved with the civil rights movement. It's not on his agenda at all. He was 26. He just got married, and he had a daughter who was 2 months old, and it was really nothing to do with him. And he knew that it was bubbling up in the community. Rosa Parks had made a protest on a bus, and people were getting antsy about it. But he liked his life full. You can imagine leading a church. Your daughter's 2 months old. He's the youngest pastor in the city. He's got his life full. It's nothing to do with him. And they said, right, we're holding this meeting about the boycott. Your church is in the right position. Can we use your church? And he's like, absolutely fine. You can use my church. They said, are you coming? And he's like, no. The day before, he's like, maybe I should go because it's in my church. I should probably show some respect and turn up. So he turns up. What he doesn't know is that all the older, wise ministers in the community are about to outmaneuver him. Because they had this meeting, and it's kind of formal in those days. You propose stuff, and there's a second proposal, a nominator, and a vote. And somehow he gets nominated as president of the new organization. Then it gets a seconder, and then someone votes him in. And he says in hindsight, if I'd thought it through and if I had time to think about it, I would have said no. Before he knew, the meeting had ended. He was on his way home, and he was the president of the new organization. And he's like, how did that happen? 2 days later, there's a phone call to his house. A man swearing down the phone at him. And says, if you don't leave town, we're going to blow your brains out and we're going to blow up your house. His daughter's 2 months old. He can't sleep. He's in his kitchen, 3 a.m. in the morning, and he's praying. But he's not praying a brave prayer. This is his prayer. God, how can I get out of town and get out of this situation that I'm in? And then he heard a voice. Luther King's kind of religious background wasn't like hearing voices, and it was quite much more of a kind of doing the right thing type of spirituality he has. But that moment he heard a voice, and this is what the voice said. It says, stand up for righteousness, stand up for justice, stand up for truth, for law. I'll be with you, even until the end of the world. This is what Luther King writes. He said, the voice, it promised to never leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised to never leave me alone. And he felt this change. And he felt this strength. He felt like he could stand up for anything at that moment at 3 a.m. in his kitchen. 2 days later, he's in his church and he's leading the meeting about the boycott and how they're going to change the world and the civil rights and the racism, and they're going to sort it all out. And he's got these people in the rallying, and somebody runs in and said, Martin Luther King, your house has just been bombed. His wife's at home. His 2-month-old daughter is at home. He leaves the meeting, he heads home, he gets home, and there's a crowd outside his house. His first attention is to run into his house. Is his daughter still alive? Is his wife still alive? He gets in, he checks that they're all right, they're safe. By the time he heads out to his house, there's an angry mob of black citizens with guns, with knives, with bottles. They're ready to cause riot. And around the outside of them is white policemen who are trying to create some order, looking a little bit terrified. And King steps out and he stands in front of everybody and he looks them in the eye. This man who 2 days previously wanted to get out of town, but now he's had an encounter with Jesus. And when you've had an encounter with Jesus, Isaiah knows this, William Booth knows this, everything changes. And he looks at everybody and he says, listen, God's with us. We're doing the right thing. So we're going to love our enemies. God's with us. We're doing the right thing. We're going to love our enemies. God's with us. We're doing the right thing. We're going to love our enemies. And one by one, the knives get put down. One by one, the guns get put down. One by one, the bottles get butt down. The tears start to flow from the angry mob as their hearts soften, and they start singing Amazing Grace instead of the guns. And that night, the direction of the civil rights movement was changed into the way of Jesus, into the way of non-violence. And it all started because of an encounter with Jesus. Because like when you have that encounter, and this is the thing about brave moves and brave prayers. Today's about brave prayer because that's where it starts. It's not about duty and it's not about roles and trying hard and trying to do stuff. It's about an encounter with Jesus that when you have that, it's like you just want to make a difference in the world. You just feel that you can do stuff with Jesus. And that's like what it's about. But it starts with a prayer. And the prayer is simply this: God shall have all there is. God shall have it all. And that's not very easy, I get it. Maybe you want to pray this one. God, I wish I could pray this. God shall have all there is. That's okay as well. And God will take care of the rest. I'm going to invite the band to come up. But I want you to think for a minute, like what would happen if across this whole 250 brave prayers went up? Imagine over here and over here and over here in your heart and in your heart and in your heart and 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 your heart. Imagine all of us, we're in our situation. We're all in different situations, but right where we are, we're like, God shall have all there is. Like, I wonder what would happen really in Stratford and Elmston and in your workplace and in Eccles, in your street and in your family. I wonder what career changes would come. I wonder what vulnerable people in our streets would be loved. I don't know. But it all starts with a brave prayer, doesn't it? I'm going to lead the band, ask the band to lead us. And really the invitation is not to do anything except pray. And the prayer is simply, God shall have all there is. And then hear his voice. And then just do whatever he says.